When people ask where I get inspiration for my designs, I could say nature, history, books. But the truth is, I am surrounded by it every single day at my day job. And honestly, I feel ridiculously lucky to have that. I work full time as a book conservator. And if you've never heard of that job, I would not be surprised. I often have to explain what that job is to people. If I were to take it down to its most simplest task, a book conservator fixes old books. Today, I want to show how that world that's full of medieval manuscripts, of tiny paintings inside of books, of early printing, of block printing, of William Morris patterns, how all of that connects to my artwork, how it influences the motifs I draw, the color palettes I choose, the layouts for patterns that I create. It's all connected. I have worked with everything from Victorian era cloth covered case bindings that you might see in your local antiques market to prints and ephemera that weren't meant to last, but somehow have made it to today. And then there are medieval manuscripts, which are filled with beautifully handwritten texts and little illustrations. You cannot be a book conservator and not spend a great deal of time closely looking at all of these characteristics and all of these things that come together to create a book. And you can't spend all that time looking at everything and not have some of it seep into your work, whether or not you try. Although, full disclosure, I see lots of things that are incredibly strange that I would never want to copy or even create my own spin and put in my own work. Now, I have to tell you about my dream project, the one that to this day still makes me a little bit giddy. A couple of years ago, I got to work on a dye sample book from William Morris and Company. Yes, that William Morris and Company, the father of the arts and crafts movement, the guy whose wallpapers you have definitely seen, even if you didn't know they were his. Getting to look through their recipes and how they put together every single color and every single fabric on every type of textile, recipes that were working documents where I could see when they didn't have it right and they X'd it out or they crossed it out and they tried again. I got to see the process of how they worked so hard to get every color exactly the way they wanted. And inside of the book, there were fabric swatches that went along with each recipe. So the person who used the recipe next knew what end result they were trying to achieve. You can't work on a project like that and not have it intermingle with your own artwork. Now, when I am sketching new motifs or trying to think of ways to lay out my next block print, I think of that project. I think about how I can make my patterns feel like they're never ending, how you can't see where the repeats are, and different ways that I can use to make that really hidden. It was a dream project. It's probably the most favorite project I've worked on in my entire career. And I've been doing this job for well over 10 years at this point. Now, the other side of my job, it's not just about the old stuff. It's about the location where I work. I am lucky enough to have a job that is actually inside a botanical garden. So if you're ever wondering why I draw so many plants and tiny animals, that's why I'm surrounded by them every single day. I spend my breaks walking through those gardens, taking reference photos of anything that looks interesting to me. Some people scroll through their phones at lunch. You could find me crouched over a fern or a tiny flower, taking reference photos. So many reference photos that I could never draw every single thing in my phone. And yet I continue to take them day in and day out. All of this, the medieval manuscripts, the William Morris patterns, the prints and ephemera, the botanical gardens, all of these things weave their way into my work in little tiny ways. Sometimes it's the colors I pick, they're rich and earthy, or sometimes they're more like Victorian cloth bindings and they're a little bit faded. And honestly, my love for traditional block printing is deeply rooted in my job as a book conservator because I get to spend a lot of time looking at old printing techniques. And I love seeing how those things are made. And I'm always endlessly impressed with how meticulous the people creating those blocks were and how they were able to create such fine details with minimal tools. It makes me want to slow down, to carve carefully, and to think about every line, every little detail, just like they did. Not just rush through something and slap it up on Instagram like I do sometimes, but I try not to. Now, I know not everybody gets to be surrounded by nature and history in the same way that I do every day, but I do. And I feel really, really lucky that all of these things have made their way into my creative process and influenced my work in ways that I never could have imagined. It's what makes my work feel like me, a little bit of nature, a little bit of history, and a little bit of nerdy obsession with botanical details. So now, I want to know what inspires you. Do you have a secret obsession that sneaks into your work? Drop it in the comments. I would love to hear what influences your creative process. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you next time.